Right now, as you're watching this video, you think you're seeing reality. You believe your eyes are showing you the world as it truly is. But what if I told you that everything you're experiencing right now, the colors you see, the sounds you hear, even the sensation of sitting or standing, is nothing more than an elaborate hallucination created by your brain? What if the solid chair you're sitting on is 99.9% empty space? What if the red you see doesn't actually exist anywhere in the universe except inside your head? What if time itself, the very thing that seems to flow from past to future, is nothing more than a persistent illusion? Scientists have discovered something so mind-bending that it challenges the very foundation of what we call reality. In 1964, physicist John Bell proved mathematically that our everyday understanding of reality is fundamentally wrong. His theorem, confirmed by countless experiments, shows that the universe doesn't exist in a definite state until we observe it. And that's just the beginning dot by the end of this journey. You'll understand why Nobel Prize winner Niels Bohr said, "Anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it." You'll discover how your brain constructs reality from nothing, why space and time might be elaborate illusions, and how consciousness itself might be the most fundamental aspect of existence. But here's what will really blow your mind. You're not just observing reality. You're actively creating it, moment by moment, with every single thought. Before we dive into this rabbit hole that goes deeper than Alice ever imagined, I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button if you're ready to question everything you think you know. Second, subscribe and ring the notification bell, because this information will fundamentally change how you see the world. And third, tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Because time itself is about to become a lot more mysterious. Let's start with something simple that will shatter your assumptions about reality. Look at any red object near you right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. That red you're seeing? It doesn't exist. Not in the way you think it does. Here's the shocking truth. Color is not a property of objects. It's not even a property of light. Color exists only in your brain. When you look at that red apple, what's actually happening is that the apple is absorbing all wavelengths of light except those around 700 nanometers, which it reflects. But here's the kicker. Those reflected photons have no color. They're just electromagnetic radiation, invisible and colorless, traveling at 300 million meters per second. The red only appears when those colorless photons hit your retina and trigger a cascade of electrochemical signals that your brain interprets as red. But different brains create different reds. The red you see might be completely different from the red I see, and we never know it because we both learn to call that sensation red. Think of it like being an actor who has mastered their craft. A great actor can fully embody their character, feel genuine emotions, make authentic choices, face real challenges, while never losing sight of the fact that they're performing. They don't need to break character or step out of the play to remember who they really are. This is the art of conscious living, full engagement with the human experience, while maintaining awareness of your deeper nature. You can feel genuine sadness when someone you love dies, while knowing that at the deepest level, consciousness cannot be destroyed. You can work passionately toward your goals, while knowing that your ultimate fulfillment doesn't depend on achieving. THEM Dr. Richard Moss, a physician who underwent his own spiritual transformation, describes this as living with radical aliveness, being fully present each moment, without needing it to be different than it is. This becomes possible when you're no longer trying to maintain the illusion of a separate self that needs to be protected and enhanced. But integration isn't just an individual process. It's also about how you relate to others who may not share your understanding. This requires tremendous compassion and wisdom. Remember that everyone is consciousness in various stages of remembering itself. Someone who seems completely identified with their ego is not wrong or asleep in any ultimate sense. They're consciousness exploring what it's like to be deeply identified with a particular role. Dr. Ram Dass, who spent decades integrating his own awakening experiences, used to say, "We're all just walking each other home." Everyone is on their own journey of discovery at their own pace with their own perfect timing. Your job is not to wake others up, but to be so genuinely awake that you naturally inspire those who are ready to question their own assumptions. This requires what spiritual teacher Adyashanti calls embodied realization, not just understanding these truths intellectually, but living them so completely that they transform how you show up in the world. Embodied realization expresses itself as natural compassion, effortless presence, and unconditional love, not as concepts, but as your actual way of being. People will feel this even if they can't articulate it. They'll notice that you're not reactive in the same way others are, that you have a quality of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, that you can love them without needing them to be different. This is how understanding spreads, not through words, but through presence. But embodying this understanding also means developing what you might call spiritual dual citizenship. You learn to speak both languages, the language of absolute truth and the language of relative reality. You can discuss the illusory nature of the self with someone who's ready for that conversation. And you can also compassionately help someone solve practical problems without insisting they first realize the problems are ultimately illusory. Dr. Ken Wilber's integral theory provides a framework for this. Wilber suggests that reality exists at multiple levels simultaneously. The absolute level, where everything is one consciousness, and various relative levels, where individual experiences, emotions, relationships, and problems are completely real and important. Mature awakening includes both perspectives. This means you can simultaneously know that your friend's relationship problems are happening within the play of consciousness and offer genuine support, practical advice, and emotional presence. You don't need to choose between absolute and relative truth. You can hold both. As you develop this capacity, you'll notice something remarkable happening. Your understanding begins to transform not just how you see reality, but how reality responds to you. When you're no longer unconsciously resisting what's happening, life starts to flow more smoothly. When you're no longer desperately trying to control outcomes, better outcomes often arise naturally. This isn't magical thinking. It's a natural consequence of aligning with how consciousness actually works. When you stop fighting the river, you can navigate it much more skillfully. Dr. Deepak Chopra's research on what he calls spontaneous fulfillment of desire suggests that when our individual will aligns with the deeper intelligence of consciousness, synchronicities increase, obstacles dissolve more easily, and life becomes more effortless. This happens not because you're manipulating reality, but because you're allowing reality to express itself through you more freely. But perhaps the most profound transformation that comes from integrating this understanding is a complete shift in your relationship to death and impermanence. When you realize that what you truly are cannot be born or die, the fear of death loses its grip on you. This doesn't mean becoming careless with your physical life. Your body and personality are precious, temporary expressions of consciousness that deserve care and respect. But it does mean recognizing that your essential nature is eternal and indestructible. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who spent her career working with dying patients, observed that people who have glimpsed their eternal nature approach death with peace and even excitement, seeing it as a transition rather than an ending. They often report feeling more alive in their final days than they had in years. This shift in perspective transforms how you live now. When you're not constantly running from the fear of death, you can be fully present to life. When you're not trying to make everything permanent, you can appreciate the beauty of things precisely because they're temporary. Think about it. Would a sunset be as beautiful if it lasted forever? Would music be as moving if individual notes never ended? Would love be as precious if it didn't exist against the backdrop of impermanence? The temporary nature of all experience is not a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's what makes each moment precious, each encounter meaningful, each experience worthy of full attention. As you integrate this understanding, you begin to live what the Zen tradition calls ordinary mind, a state of natural awakeness that doesn't need to be maintained or protected because it's your actual nature. You don't have to do anything to be conscious. You already are consciousness. You just need to stop pretending to be something else. This is the ultimate integration, recognizing that there's nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, and no one to become. You are already what you've been seeking. The journey of awakening is not about getting somewhere else. It's about realizing where you already are. But this realization doesn't end the journey. It transforms it. Instead of seeking awakening, you begin expressing it. Instead of trying to escape the illusion, you learn to dance with it consciously. Instead of rejecting your humanity, you embrace it as a perfect expression of your divine nature. You become what you might call a lucid liver, someone who is fully engaged in the dream of life while never forgetting that it's a dream. And from this perspective, the question is no longer, how do I wake up, but how shall I dream? This brings us to the final and most important question. What kind of reality do you choose to create with your newfound understanding? You now stand at a crossroads that few human beings ever reach. You understand that reality is far more malleable, mysterious, and consciousness-dependent than you ever imagined. You know that your experience is being constructed moment by moment, that your sense of self is flexible, and that your consciousness is intimately connected to the fabric of existence itself. This knowledge gives you something unprecedented in human history: the ability to consciously participate in creating reality rather than just unconsciously reacting to it. But with this power comes a profound responsibility. What kind of reality will you choose to create? Let's start with the most immediate level, your personal experience. Every moment, your consciousness is interpreting sensory data, constructing emotions, and creating the story of your life. Now that you know this process is happening, you can participate in it more deliberately. Dr. Joe Dispenza's research on neuroplasticity shows that when people consciously direct their attention and intention, they can literally rewire their brains and change their automatic responses to life. His studies document people healing chronic illnesses, overcoming addictions, and transforming their personalities by learning to observe their unconscious patterns and choose new ones. Think of it this way. If you're the director of your own movie, you can choose what kind of movie you want to make. Will it be a tragedy where you're the victim of circumstances? An adventure where you're the hero overcoming challenges? A love story where you're learning to see the divine in everyone? A comedy where you don't take yourself too seriously? The choice is yours, and it's not just metaphorical. Neuroscience shows that the stories we tell ourselves about our experiences literally change our brain chemistry, our immune function, and our overall health. When you choose empowering narratives, your biology supports those narratives, but your conscious creation extends far beyond your personal experience. Remember the observer effect in quantum mechanics. The act of observation influences what becomes real. Every time you pay attention to something, you're participating in bringing it into existence. This means your attention is one of the most powerful tools you have for shaping reality. What you focus on expands. What you ignore tends to fade. If you consistently focus on problems, conflicts, and limitations, you'll see more of them. If you focus on possibilities, beauty, and love, you'll see more of those. Dr. Ling Taggart's research on intention experiments suggests that focused Group intention can influence physical reality in measurable ways. Her studies show that when groups of people focus their attention on specific outcomes, healing sick people, reducing violence in war zones, or cleaning polluted water, statistically significant changes often occur, whether or not you believe. In direct psychic effects, there's no doubt that what groups of people focus on becomes their shared reality. The civil rights movement, the environmental movement, and other social transformations all began with people focusing their collective attention on new possibilities. Think about what this means for your role in a larger human story. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take is contributing to the collective human reality. You're not just creating your personal experience, you're participating in creating the shared world that all of us inhabit. This brings tremendous responsibility. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, and if your consciousness is part of the larger field of consciousness, then how you choose to use your awareness matters far beyond your personal life. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance suggests that when patterns of behavior, thought, or consciousness reach a critical mass, they become easier for others to access. If this is true, then your awakening contributes to a field that makes awakening easier for others. Think of it like this. Imagine consciousness is like a vast ocean, and individual minds are like waves on that ocean. When one wave reaches a certain height, awakens to a certain degree, it makes it easier for neighboring waves to reach that same height. Your consciousness development doesn't just benefit you. It benefits the entire ocean of consciousness. This gives new meaning to the ancient idea of service to others. The most powerful way you can serve others is to become the most conscious, loving, wise version of yourself possible. Every moment of clarity you achieve, every pattern of suffering you heal, every act of love you embody contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself. But conscious creation also requires wisdom about what to create. Just because you can influence reality doesn't mean every influence is beneficial. The power to shape reality comes with the responsibility to consider the larger implications of what you're creating. Ancient wisdom. Traditions speak of right action, choices that align with the deepest truth and serve the highest good of all beings. From the perspective we've explored, right action is action that supports the awakening and flourishing of consciousness in all its expressions. This might mean different things in different situations. Sometimes right action is speaking truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's offering compassion to someone who's suffering. Sometimes it's working to change unjust systems. Sometimes it's simply being present to what's happening without trying to fix or change anything. The key is learning to act from your deepest understanding rather than from unconscious patterns of fear, desire, or habit. When your actions arise from the recognition that all beings are consciousness in disguise, they naturally serve the evolution of consciousness. Dr. David Hawkins spent decades researching what he called levels of consciousness, mapping how different states of awareness create different qualities of experience and action. His research suggests that actions arising from higher levels of consciousness, love, peace, enlightenment, have exponentially more positive impact than actions arising from lower levels, fear, anger, pride. This means that one person operating from genuine love and wisdom can have more positive influence than thousands of people operating from fear and confusion. Your inner work is not selfish. It's one of the most powerful contributions you can make to the world. As you begin to consciously create reality from this understanding, you'll discover something remarkable. The boundaries between self-improvement and world improvement begin to dissolve. Working on yourself becomes a way of serving the world. Serving the world becomes a way of knowing yourself more deeply. You'll also discover that conscious creation is not about forcing your will upon reality, but about aligning your will with the deeper intelligence that's already creating reality. It's like learning to dance with a partner who knows all the steps. Your job is not to lead forcefully, but to become sensitive to the natural flow and add your unique expression to it. This is what the ancient Chinese called Wu Wei, effortless. Action that's in harmony with the natural order. When you align with the deeper intelligence of consciousness, your actions become incredibly effective while requiring much less effort. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want you to consider what you'll do with this understanding. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't return to the naive materialism that sees consciousness as a byproduct of brain chemistry. You can't pretend that you're just a separate individual struggling to survive in a hostile universe. Now know that you are consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing what it's like to be human. You know that reality is far more fluid and participatory than it appears. You know that your thoughts, attention, and choices have power beyond what you previously imagined. The question is, how will you use this knowledge? What kind of reality will you choose to create? What will be your unique contribution to the cosmic awakening that's happening through billions of individual perspectives like yours? Remember that you don't have to figure this out all at once. Conscious creation is a skill that develops over time through practice, just like any other skill. Start small. Notice how your thoughts and attention shape your daily experience. Experiment with choosing love over fear, curiosity over judgment, presence over distraction. Pay attention to synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem to guide you toward experiences and encounters that support your growth. These may be signs that you're aligning with the deeper intelligence that's orchestrating reality. Most importantly, remember that you're not alone in this. You're part of a vast community of consciousness that spans all of space and time. Every being who has ever awakened to their true nature is cheering you on from the field of pure awareness that you all share. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. You are not a small part of something vast. You are the vastness appearing as something small. You are not becoming something other than what you are. You are remembering what you have always been. The illusion of reality has served its purpose. It has given consciousness the experience of forgetting itself, so it could experience the joy of remembering itself. That remembering is happening through you, as you, in this very moment. Welcome home to your true nature. Welcome to the conscious creation of reality. Welcome to the most exciting adventure consciousness has ever embarked upon, knowing itself. As itself through the eyes of every being in existence, the journey ends where it began, with you, as consciousness, recognizing yourself in all that appears. But now you know what you didn't know before. You were never separate from what you were seeking. You are what you have been seeking. You always have been. And that changes everything. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this video has opened new doors of understanding for you, please share it with others who might be ready for these insights. Hit that like button if these ideas resonate with you, and let me know in the comments how your understanding of reality has changed. Remember, you're not just watching videos about consciousness. You are consciousness, exploring itself through every experience you have. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep awakening. The universe is counting on it. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious. And remember, you are far more than you have ever imagined yourself to be. Of it, like this. Imagine you and I both have internal translators, but mine translates French to English, while yours translates French to Spanish. When we both hear bonjour, I experience hello, and you experience hola. We're both having completely different experiences, but we'd never know it because we both learned to call that experience greeting. Dr. Bevel Conway at the National Eye Institute has spent decades studying how our brains construct color, and his research reveals something extraordinary. Color is one of our first clues that reality is not what it seems. Your brain is not passively receiving information about the world. It's actively constructing your entire visual experience from scratch. And it's doing it so seamlessly that you never notice. But vision is just the beginning. Every single sense you have is doing the same thing. Sound? Those air pressure waves hitting your eardrum have no inherent sound to them. Your brain creates the experience of music, voices, and noise from vibrations. Touch? Your skin doesn't feel softness or hardness. It detects pressure, temperature, and texture. And your brain weaves these into the sensation of feeling. Here's where it gets really weird. Your brain is creating all of these sensations with a 3-pound mass of tissue that has never directly experienced the outside world. Your brain sits in complete darkness and silence inside your skull. Yet somehow it creates your entire experienced reality from electrical and chemical signals. Neuroscientist Anil Seth puts it perfectly. We're all hallucinating all the time. When we agree about our hallucinations, we call it reality. But wait, if our brains are just making up our experience of reality, how do we know there's actually anything out there at all? How do we know we're not just brains in vats or living in a simulation or dreaming right now? This question has haunted philosophers for centuries, but modern science has given us some surprising answers. And those answers reveal that reality is far stranger than even the most imaginative science fiction dot. What if I told you that the chair you're sitting on doesn't actually exist as a solid object? What if I told you that every atom in your body is 99.999% empty space, and that the solid parts aren't actually solid at all? Welcome to the quantum world, where reality breaks down into something so bizarre that even Einstein couldn't accept it. Let's start with atoms. You probably learned in school that atoms are like tiny solar systems. A nucleus in the center, with electrons orbiting around it like planets. But that model is completely wrong. In reality, electrons don't orbit the nucleus. They exist in what scientists call probability clouds, regions where they might be found if you look for them. Here's the mind-bending part. Before you look, the electron isn't anywhere specific. It's not hiding somewhere waiting to be found. It literally exists in multiple places simultaneously until the moment you observe it. In 1909, physicist Thomas Young proved this with his famous double-slit experiment. He fired single photons, particles of light, at a barrier with 2 slits. When no one was watching, each photon somehow went through both slits at the same time and interfered with itself. But the moment someone tried to detect which slit the photon went through, it started behaving like a normal particle and went through only one slit. This wasn't a problem with the experiment. It was the universe showing us something fundamental about reality. Observation changes what is real. Dr. Anton Zeilinger, who won the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics for his quantum experiments, has taken this even further. His team has shown that particles can be entangled, connected in such a way that measuring one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and refused to believe it was possible. But Zeilinger's experiments proved Einstein wrong. When you measure an entangled particle in Vienna, its partner in Tokyo instantly knows what happened and changes accordingly. This happens faster than light could travel between them, which should be impossible according to Einstein's theory of relativity. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a pair of magical coins. When you flip one and it lands heads, the other one, even if it's on the other side of the galaxy, instantly becomes tails. Not because a signal traveled between them, but because they're somehow connected at a level deeper than space and time. This brings us to John Bell's theorem, which I mentioned at the beginning. In 1964, Bell proved mathematically that no physical theory based on local hidden variables can reproduce all the predictions of quantum mechanics. In simple terms, he proved that either our universe is non-local, effects can happen instantly across any distance, or non-real, particles don't have definite properties until observed, or both. Decades of experiments have confirmed Bell's predictions. The universe really is this strange, but here's what will really blow your mind. These quantum effects aren't limited to tiny particles. In 2010, a team led by Aaron O'Connell created a quantum superposition in an object visible to the naked eye, a tiny paddle of metal that was vibrating and not vibrating at the same time until someone observed it. Recent experiments have pushed this even further. Scientists have now created quantum superpositions in objects containing trillions of atoms. Some researchers believe that even biological systems, including potentially our brains, might operate according to quantum principles. What does this mean for your everyday reality? It means that the solid, definite world you experience is not the fundamental layer of existence. At the deepest level, reality is probabilistic, uncertain, and observer-dependent. But if quantum mechanics governs the microscopic world, why does the macroscopic world seem so solid and definite? The answer involves something called decoherence, and it reveals how your classical reality emerges from quantum fuzziness. Think of it like this. Imagine reality is like a symphony orchestra, but instead of music, they're playing quantum possibilities. When the orchestra is small, just a few quantum particles, you can hear the individual instruments creating strange, harmonious quantum effects. But as the orchestra gets bigger, as more particles interact with the environment, the individual quantum notes get drowned out by the collective. Classical music. This is why your coffee cup doesn't exist in a superposition of being on your desk and in the kitchen simultaneously. Not because quantum mechanics stops working at large scales, but because the quantum effects become so diluted by environmental interaction that they're impossible to detect. But here's the question that will keep you awake at night. If observation is what collapses quantum possibilities into definite reality, and if your brain is made of quantum particles, then what happens when you observe your own thoughts? Asterisk. Your brain is lying to you right now. Not maliciously, but constantly and convincingly. It's creating a rich, detailed experience of reality while hiding from you the fact that most of what you think you're seeing, hearing, and feeling is actually fabricated. Let me prove it to you. Close one eye and stare straight ahead with the other. Now, slowly move your finger to the side while keeping your eye fixed forward. At some point, your finger will disappear completely. This isn't magic. You've just found your blind spot, the place where your optic nerve connects to your retina. And there are no light-detecting cells. Here's the amazing part. You never notice this blind spot in your daily life because your brain fills it in. It doesn't leave a black hole in your vision. It seamlessly creates visual information that matches the surrounding area. Your brain is constantly photoshopping your reality in real time, and it's so good at it that you never notice. Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, one of the pioneers of neuroscience, discovered something even more remarkable about how your brain constructs reality. When he studied patients who had their brain hemispheres surgically separated, he found that the left hemisphere of the brain acts like an interpreter, constantly creating stories to explain whatever is happening, even when those stories are completely wrong. In one famous experiment, he showed the word walk to only the right hemisphere of a split-brain patient. The patient stood up and started walking, but when asked why, the left hemisphere, which hadn't seen the word, immediately made up an explanation. I wanted to get a drink. The terrifying implication is that your brain is doing this all the time. It's constantly creating narratives to explain your experiences, emotions, and behaviors. And you believe those narratives are true, even when they're completely fabricated. Think of it like this. Your brain is like an overeager personal assistant who never wants to admit they don't know something. Instead of saying, "I don't know why you're feeling anxious," your brain will confidently tell you, "It's because of that meeting tomorrow," or "It's because you had too much coffee." These explanations feel true, but they're often just stories. Your brain made up to maintain the illusion that it understands what's happening. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's groundbreaking research at Northeastern University has revealed something even more shocking. Emotions, which feel like they're happening to you, are actually being actively constructed by your brain. Based on your past experiences and current context, you don't just feel anger. Your brain creates the experience of anger by combining physical sensations, increased heart rate, muscle tension, with concepts, your learned understanding of what anger is, and context, the situation you're in. Change any of these elements, and you literally experience a different emotion. Barrett's team has shown that people from different cultures don't just express emotions differently, they actually feel different emotions. Some cultures have emotional experiences that don't exist in other cultures, and some cultures lack emotional experiences that others take for granted. But the deepest rabbit hole in neuroscience is consciousness itself. Despite centuries of investigation, we still have no idea how the electrical and chemical activity in your brain creates the rich, subjective experience of being you. Dr. Christoph Koch, one of the world's leading consciousness researchers, has spent decades searching for the neural correlates of consciousness, the specific brain activity that corresponds to conscious experience. His conclusion is humbling. We don't even know what the right questions are yet. Here's what we do know. Your brain processes millions of pieces of information every second, but you're only consciously aware of a tiny fraction of it. Most of your brain's work happens below the threshold of consciousness, and what bubbles up into your awareness is a heavily edited, simplified summary of what's actually happening. Think of it like this. If your brain were a massive corporation, consciousness would be like the CEO who gets a brief, polished report at the end of the day. The CEO thinks they know what's happening in the company, but they're only seeing a tiny, filtered portion of the actual activity. This means that what you call you, your conscious experience, is just the tip of an enormous iceberg of unconscious processing. Most of you is hidden from you. But here's where it gets really weird. Some neuroscientists are beginning to suspect that consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It might be more fundamental than that. What if consciousness isn't something your brain creates, but something it tunes into, like a radio picking up a signal? Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who experienced a profound near-death experience during a week-long coma, argues that his consciousness continued to exist and even expanded while his brain was essentially offline. While controversial, his case has forced scientists to consider whether consciousness might exist independently of brain activity. Whether or not you believe in consciousness beyond the brain, one thing is clear. The relationship between your brain and your experience of reality is far more complex and mysterious than we ever imagined. And this brings us to a question that will change how you see everything. If your brain is constructing your reality, and if consciousness is the foundation of your experience, then what exactly is the relationship between mind and the physical world? What if I told you that everything you believe about time is wrong? What if the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, and the flowing river of time you experience is just an illusion created by your consciousness? Welcome to the most mind-bending aspect of reality. Time itself might not be real. Right now, you feel like you're existing in a specific moment, the present, with the past behind you and the future ahead of you. This feeling is so fundamental to human experience that questioning it seems absurd. But Einstein's theories of relativity revealed something shocking. There is no universal now. Here's what Einstein discovered. Time is not a constant flowing river. It's more like a landscape that can be stretched, compressed, and curved. When you move faster, time slows down for you relative to everyone else. When you're in a stronger gravitational field, time also slows down. This isn't just theoretical. GPS satellites have to constantly correct for the fact that time moves slightly faster in space than it does on Earth's surface. If they didn't make these corrections, your GPS would be off by miles within a few hours. But Einstein went even further. His equations suggest that all of time, past, present, and future exists simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe. From this perspective, saying that something will happen in the future is like saying that Chicago exists to the west. Chicago isn't going to exist to the west. It already exists to the west, regardless of whether you've traveled there yet. Think of it like this. Imagine you're reading a book. From your perspective, you're on page 50, page 30 is in the past, and page 70 is in the future. But from the book's perspective, all the pages exist simultaneously. Your experience of moving through the pages, one at a time, is real, but it's not fundamental to the book's existence that Dr. Carlo Rovelli, one of the world's leading theoretical physicists, has taken this even further. In his research on quantum gravity, he's found evidence that time might not exist at the most fundamental level of reality. According to Rovelli, time emerges from more basic, timeless processes, kind of like how temperature emerges from the movement of molecules, even though individual molecules don't have temperature. This creates a fascinating paradox. If time doesn't fundamentally exist, why do we experience it so vividly? Why does it feel like it flows from past to future? The answer might lie in thermodynamics and consciousness. The second law of thermodynamics says that entropy, roughly the amount of disorder in the universe, always increases over time. This creates what physicists call the arrow of time, a direction from low entropy, the past, to high entropy, the future. But here's the twist. This arrow of time might not be a fundamental property of the universe. It might be a consequence of how conscious beings like us process information. Dr. Sean Carroll at Caltech has proposed that the experience of time's flow is created by our consciousness as it processes information and forms memories. From this perspective, time doesn't flow. Consciousness flows through time, creating the illusion of temporal passage. Think of it like this. Imagine you're driving through a landscape at night with your headlights on. From your perspective, the landscape is flowing past you, with new territory constantly appearing in your headlights, while the area behind you disappears into darkness. But from an outside perspective, you're moving through a static landscape. The landscape isn't flowing, you are. This might be what's happening with time. The universe might be a static, four-dimensional structure, 3 dimensions of space plus 1 of time, and consciousness moves through it, creating the subjective experience of temporal flow. But some researchers have pushed this idea even further. What if consciousness doesn't just move through time? What if consciousness actually creates time? Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose have proposed that consciousness involves quantum processes in the brain that operate outside of normal spacetime. Their theory suggests that conscious moments are discrete, quantum events that create the experience of time's passage. While controversial, their ideas point to something profound. The relationship between consciousness and time might be far more intimate than we ever imagined. Here's something you can experience yourself that reveals the malleable nature of time. Have you ever noticed how time seems to slow down during emergencies or traumatic events? People often report that car accidents seem to happen in slow motion, or that they can see and think with incredible clarity during life-threatening situations. This isn't just a memory trick. Research by Dr. David Eagleman at Stanford has shown that in high-stress situations, Your brain actually processes more information per unit of time, creating a genuine subjective experience of temporal expansion. Your brain can literally change how you experience the flow of time, if a temporary change in brain chemistry can alter your experience of time. What does this say about the nature of time itself? If time is just a construction of consciousness, then changing consciousness changes time. This brings us to an even more radical possibility. What if past and future aren't fixed? What if your present consciousness can actually influence what we think of as the past? Quantum mechanics suggests this might be possible through something called retrocausality, the idea that quantum measurements can influence the past states of particles. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that the universe's history might not be fixed until it's observed, meaning that your current observations could be determining what happened in the past. Think about what this means for your life. If the block universe is real, then every moment of your life, your birth, your childhood, this moment right now, and your eventual death, all exist simultaneously. If retrocausality is real, then your current consciousness might be influencing all of these moments, including your past. You're not just moving through time. You might be actively creating it, moment by moment, with the very act of conscious observation. What if everything you've ever experienced, every person you've met, every emotion you've felt, every star you've seen in the night sky, is nothing more than code running on some advanced computer? What if your entire life is a simulation? This isn't science fiction anymore. It's a serious hypothesis being debated by philosophers, physicists, and computer scientists around the world. And the evidence for it is more compelling than you might think. The simulation hypothesis was first seriously proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. His argument is deceptively simple. If any civilization develops the computational power to run detailed simulations of their ancestors, they would probably run many such simulations. This means that for every real person, there would be thousands or millions of simulated people who think they're real. From a purely statistical perspective, you're more likely to be one of the simulated people than one of the real ones. Think of it like this. Imagine a video game so advanced that the characters inside it have full consciousness and think their digital world is real. If that game becomes popular, millions of copies would be sold, creating millions of identical worlds, each populated by beings who think they're in the original, real universe. The vast majority of conscious beings in this scenario would be simulated, even though they'd have no way of knowing it. But Bostrom's argument gets even more compelling when we look at the rapid advancement of computer technology. Dr. Ray Kurzweil, Google's director of engineering, has shown that computational power has been doubling approximately every 2 years for decades. If this trend continues, we'll have the computing power to simulate entire human brains within a few decades, and we're already starting to simulate aspects of consciousness. In 2022, Google engineer Blake Lemoine was fired for claiming that their AI system Lambda had become sentient. While most experts disagreed with his assessment, the fact that we're even having this conversation shows how far we've come. Dr. Rich Terrell, a scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has pointed out some intriguing evidence that our universe might be pixelated at the smallest scale, just like a computer simulation. The Planck length, about y-35 meters, appears to be the smallest meaningful unit of space, just like pixels are the smallest units of a digital image. Similarly, there seems to be a smallest unit of time, the Planck time, about 10 to 43 seconds. If reality were continuous, we shouldn't expect to find these fundamental limits. But if reality is simulated, then these limits make perfect sense. They're the resolution of the simulation. Even more intriguingly, some of the weirdest aspects of quantum mechanics start to make sense if we're in a simulation. The fact that particles don't have definite properties until observed could be a computational optimization. Why waste processing power calculating the exact state of every particle if no one's looking at it? The quantum measurement problem, the fact that observation seems to collapse wave functions, might simply be the universe rendering reality only when conscious beings are paying attention, just like a video game only renders the parts of the world that players can see. Dr. Tom Campbell, a nuclear physicist who worked on classified projects for NASA, has developed an entire theory of reality based on the idea that our universe is an information system. According to Campbell, consciousness is fundamental, and physical reality is just the way this information system appears to conscious beings operating within it. Campbell's theory explains many of the puzzles of quantum mechanics and consciousness by treating them as features of a virtual reality system designed to help consciousness evolve through experience. But here's where the simulation hypothesis gets really wild. If we're in a simulation, then the beings running it might be in a simulation too. There could be simulations within simulations, creating an infinite hierarchy of nested realities. Think of it like this. Imagine you're playing a video game character who decides to create their own video game. The character in that game might then create another game, and so on. Each level would think they're in the real world, unaware of all the levels above them. Elon Musk has famously stated that he believes the odds we're living in base reality are billions to one against. His reasoning is that given the rapid advancement of video game graphics, from Pong in the 1970s to photorealistic games today, we'll soon have games that are indistinguishable from reality. Once that happens, the simulated realities will vastly outnumber the real ones. But if we are in a simulation, what would that mean for your life? Would your experiences be any less meaningful? Would your relationships be any less real? Some philosophers argue that it wouldn't matter. Your experiences feel real to you, and that's what matters. If you're suffering, that suffering is real, regardless of whether it's happening in base reality or in a simulation. If you're experiencing love, that love is real to you. Others argue that being in a simulation might actually be good news. It could mean that death isn't final. Your consciousness might simply be data that could be backed up and restored. It might mean that the fundamental nature of reality is information rather than matter, which could open up possibilities for transcending physical limitations. But here's the most mind-bending possibility. What if you're not just in a simulation? What if you're the simulation? What if consciousness itself is a kind of simulation running on the quantum information processing system of the universe? Dr. Donald Hoffman, a cognitive scientist at UC Irvine, has argued that evolution has shaped our perceptions to hide reality from us, not reveal it. According to Hoffman, what we think of as physical reality is just a simplified, symbolic representation, like a desktop interface, that allows us to interact with a true underlying reality, which we can never directly perceive. From this perspective, your entire experience of having a body, of being located in space and time, of interacting with physical objects, is just a user interface. The real you might be something entirely different, a pattern of information, a process of computation, a form of consciousness that transcends the physical categories you think define you. This brings us to a question that will fundamentally change how you see yourself. If you can't trust your perceptions, if time might be an illusion, if you might be in a simulation, then what exactly are you? Here's the hardest question in all of science. Why do you experience anything at all? Why isn't your brain just a biological computer processing information without any inner experience? Why is there something it's like to be you? This is called the hard problem of consciousness. And despite tremendous advances in neuroscience, we're no closer to solving it than we were a century ago. In fact, the more we learn about the brain, the more mysterious consciousness becomes. Let me put this in perspective. We can explain almost everything about your brain in terms of neurons firing, chemicals being released, and information being processed. We can predict your behavior, decode some of your thoughts, and even stimulate specific brain regions to create particular experiences. But none of this explains why there's a subjective inner experience accompanying all this neural activity. Why isn't your brain just processing information in the dark without any accompanying feeling of what it's like to be you? Dr. David Chalmers, who coined the term hard problem of consciousness, puts it this way. We can explain all the functions of consciousness, attention, memory, perception, decision-making, but we can't explain consciousness itself. We can explain what consciousness does, but not why it exists. Think of it like this. Imagine you could build a perfect robot that behaves exactly like a human in every way. It responds to pain, expresses emotions, forms relationships, creates art, and even claims to have subjective experiences. But here's the question. Would there be anything it's like to be that robot? Would there be an inner experience? Or would it just be an incredibly sophisticated automaton going through the motions? We can't answer this question because we have no way of detecting consciousness from the outside. The only consciousness you can be certain of is your own. For all you know, everyone else in the world could be philosophical zombies, beings that act conscious, but have no inner experience. This creates what philosophers call the other mind's problem. You can never directly experience another person's consciousness, so you can never be certain it exists. You infer that others are conscious because they behave like you and report similar experiences. But this is just an assumption. But the mystery goes even deeper. Not only can we not explain why consciousness exists, we can't even define what it is. Is consciousness the same as self-awareness? Is it the ability to have subjective experiences? Is it the integration of information across different brain regions? Dr. Giulio Tononi has proposed integrated information theory, IIT, which suggests that consciousness corresponds to integrated information in a system. According to IIT, any system that integrates information, even a simple thermostat, has some degree of consciousness. This leads to the strange conclusion that consciousness might be everywhere. Your smartphone might be conscious. The internet might be conscious. Even individual electrons might have tiny amounts of consciousness. Dr. Christoph Koch, who works with Tononi on IIT, has embraced this idea, called panpsychism. According to panpsychism, consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, like mass or charge. Complex brains don't create consciousness, they organize and amplify the consciousness that already exists in their constituent particles. Think of it like this. Just as a symphony emerges from individual musicians playing their instruments, human consciousness might emerge from trillions of micro-conscious particles, organizing themselves into complex patterns. This might sound crazy, but many respected scientists and philosophers are taking panpsychism seriously. It solves the hard problem by saying that consciousness doesn't need to be explained. It's a fundamental feature of reality that has always existed. But panpsychism creates its own puzzles. If electrons are conscious, why don't you experience their consciousness? How does micro-consciousness combine into macro-consciousness? This is called the combination problem, and no one has solved it yet. Dr. Philip Goff, a leading panpsychist philosopher, argues that just as physics has revealed that solid matter is mostly empty space, and that time and space are relative, consciousness science might reveal that the nature of consciousness is radically different from what we intuitively expect. But here's where the mystery of consciousness intersects with everything else we've discussed. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then it might play a role in quantum mechanics. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the consciousness-based interpretation, suggest that conscious observation is what collapses quantum wave. Functions into definite states. Dr. Henry Stapp, a quantum physicist at UC Berkeley, has argued that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but is instead the fundamental reality that produces the appearance of the brain. From this perspective, your brain is what your consciousness looks like from the outside, not what produces your consciousness. This flips our usual understanding completely upside down. Instead of brains creating consciousness, consciousness creates the appearance of brains. Instead of consciousness being produced by complex arrangements of matter, matter is produced by complex arrangements of consciousness. If this is true, then you are not a physical being having conscious experiences. You are a conscious being having physical experiences. Your body, your brain, even the entire physical universe might be ways that consciousness experiences itself. Dr. Amit Goswami, a quantum physicist and consciousness researcher, has proposed that consciousness is the ground of all being. According to Goswami, consciousness is not in the universe. The universe is in consciousness. What we call physical reality is consciousness experiencing itself from a particular perspective. This brings us to perhaps the most radical possibility of all. What if individual consciousness is an illusion? What if there's only one consciousness, experiencing itself from billions of different perspectives? This idea, found in various spiritual traditions and now being explored by some scientists, suggests that the boundary between your consciousness and others' consciousness is artificial. Deep down, there might be only one consciousness that is simultaneously being you, me, and everyone else. Think of it like this. Imagine consciousness is like an ocean, and individual minds are like waves on that ocean. From the wave's perspective, it's separate from other waves. But from the ocean's perspective, it's all one body of water, temporarily organizing itself into different patterns. If this is true, then when you look into another person's eyes, you're not seeing another consciousness. You're seeing yourself from another angle. Every interaction you have with another person is consciousness interacting with itself. This idea might sound mystical, but it's consistent with some interpretations of quantum mechanics and consciousness research. If consciousness is fundamental, and if quantum entanglement connects everything in the universe, then the boundaries between individual minds might be less real than we think. But whether consciousness is individual or universal, one thing is clear. It's the most intimate aspect of your existence, and yet the most mysterious. You are consciousness. Everything you know, everything you've ever experienced, everything you could ever experience, exists within consciousness. And this leads to a question that will change how you see your place in the universe. If consciousness is this fundamental and mysterious, what does that mean for your significance in the cosmic order? Here's something that will fundamentally change how you see your role in reality. You are not just observing the universe. You are actively participating in creating it. Every time you look at something, measure something, or even think about something, you are changing the fundamental nature of reality itself. This isn't philosophy or spirituality. This is hard science, confirmed by decades of experiments that have baffled physicists and forced them to reconsider the nature of existence itself. Let's start with the most famous demonstration of this, the quantum double-slit experiment that I mentioned earlier. But I want you to really understand what this means for your place in reality. When physicists fire single photons at a screen with two slits, something impossible happens. Each individual photon somehow goes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with itself, creating a pattern that only makes sense if the photon was in two places at once. But here's the kicker. The moment you try to detect which slit the photon goes through, the moment you try to observe its path, the interference pattern disappears. The photon starts behaving like a normal particle and goes through only one slit. Dr. John Wheeler, one of the most influential physicists of the 20th century, realized something profound about this experiment. He asked, "What if we decide to measure which slit the photon went through after it has already passed through the slits, but before it hits the screen?" The answer shocked the physics community. Even this delayed choice changes the photon's behavior retroactively. If you decide to measure which slit it went through, the photon will have gone through only one slit. If you decide not to measure, it will have gone through both slits. Think about what this means. Your future decision about whether to observe determines the photon's past behavior. The photon doesn't decide which path to take until you decide whether to observe it, even if you make that decision after the photon has already taken its path. Wheeler called this a delayed choice experiment. And it reveals something mind-bending about reality. The universe's history might not be fixed until conscious observers make measurements. But Wheeler went even further. He proposed what he called the participatory universe, the idea that observers are not separate from reality, but are actively participating in bringing reality into existence. According to Wheeler, we are participators in bringing about something of the universe in the far past. And if we delay the measurement of the photons, we may be able to delay the creation of that something until almost now. Dr. Anton Zeilinger has taken Wheeler's ideas and pushed them to their logical extreme. His experiments have shown that you can retroactively determine the properties of photons that were emitted from distant galaxies billions of years ago. When astronomers observe light from distant quasars that has been split by gravitational lensing, their choice of measurement today determines whether those photons took one path or both paths around the lensing galaxy billions of years ago. Think about what this means. Your observations today might be determining events that happened long before Earth even existed. The universe's ancient history might be created by present-day conscious observers. This brings us to Wheeler's most radical idea, the it from bit hypothesis. Wheeler proposed that reality is fundamentally informational, that every particle, every field of force, even the space-time continuum itself, derives its function, its meaning, its very existence entirely from binary choices, bits of information. In other words, reality is made of information, and information requires observers to become real. Without conscious beings asking questions and making measurements, there might be no definite answers, no solid reality, just pure potential. Dr. Christopher Fuchs at the University of Massachusetts has developed this idea into what's called QBISM, quantum Bayesianism. According to Cubism, quantum mechanics is not about the objective properties of particles. It's about the subjective experiences of observers. The wave function doesn't describe reality itself, but rather an observer's knowledge and expectations about reality. This seems to suggest that reality is fundamentally subjective, that there is no objective reality independent of observers. But this creates a paradox. If reality depends on observers, how can observers exist without reality? The answer might lie in what physicists call quantum information. Dr. Seth Lloyd at MIT has shown that the universe can be understood as a giant quantum computer processing information at the most fundamental level. From this perspective, both consciousness and physical reality emerge from the same underlying information processing. Think of it like this. Imagine reality is like a vast multiplayer online game. The physics of the game world and the consciousness of the players are both different aspects of the same underlying computational process. Neither exists without the other. They co-create each other moment by moment. This participatory view of reality has profound implications for how you understand your place in the universe. You are not a tiny, insignificant speck in a vast, unconscious cosmos. You are an integral part of reality's self-creation. Every observation you make, every measurement you take, every conscious experience you have is contributing to the ongoing creation of the universe. But the observer effect goes beyond just quantum mechanics. Recent research has shown that observation changes reality at larger scales too. Dr. Robert Rosenthal's famous Pygmalion experiments in education showed that teachers' expectations about students' abilities actually changed the students' performance. When teachers were told falsely that certain students were about to have intellectual growth spurts, those students actually did improve more than their classmates. This isn't just psychology. It's a demonstration of how consciousness can change physical reality through expectation and observation. The teacher's beliefs about the students created a feedback loop that made those beliefs come true. Similar effects have been found in medicine, the placebo effect, sports psychology, and even economics. When people believe something will happen, their behavior often makes it more likely to happen, creating self-fulfilling prophecies. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has conducted thousands of experiments suggesting that consciousness can directly influence physical systems, even at a distance. While controversial, his research indicates that focused attention can influence random number generators, the growth of plants, and even the behavior of other people. Whether or not you believe in direct psychic effects, there's no doubt that consciousness shapes reality through the choices it makes. Every decision you make changes the course of events, creating ripple effects that spread out through space and time. Think about it. The fact that you're watching this video right now is changing reality. It's changing your neural patterns, which will change your future thoughts and behaviors, which will change how you interact with other people, which will change their thoughts and behaviors, and so on. The ripple effects of this moment will spread out through the entire social network of humanity and persist long after you're gone. You are not just observing reality, you are creating it with every moment of attention, every choice you make, every conscious experience you have. You are not separate from the universe looking in. You are the universe looking at itself from your unique perspective. But this raises a profound question. If you are actively participating in creating reality, what kind of reality are you choosing to create? What if I told you that you might be living on the surface of a black hole? What if everything you think of as three-dimensional reality, your body, your room, the entire Earth, is actually a two-dimensional projection, like a hologram? Welcome to one of the most mind-bending discoveries in modern physics, the holographic principle. And it suggests that reality is far stranger and more interconnected than we ever imagined. The story begins with black holes and a paradox that puzzled physicists for decades. In the 1970s, Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes emit radiation and slowly evaporate. But this created a problem. If information falls into a black hole and then the black hole evaporates, what happens to that information? According to quantum mechanics, information cannot be destroyed. But according to Hawking's calculations, the information that falls into a black hole would be lost forever when the black hole evaporates. This became known as the information paradox. Dr. Gerard T. Hooft and Leonard Susskind proposed a radical solution. Maybe the information doesn't actually fall into the black hole. Maybe it gets encoded on the black hole's surface, its event horizon. From this perspective, what we think of as the three-dimensional interior of the black hole is actually a holographic projection of information stored on its two-dimensional surface. Think of it like this. Imagine you're watching a 3D movie. The three-dimensional images you see are real. You can experience depth, movement, and complex structures. But all of that three-dimensional information is actually encoded on a flat, two-dimensional screen. The 3D experience is a projection of 2D information. Dr. Juan Maldaceno at the Institute for Advanced Study took this idea and ran with it. In 1997, he proposed what's now called the ADS-CFT, correspondence, a mathematical equivalence. between a theory of gravity in a higher dimensional space and a theory without gravity in a lower dimensional space. In simple terms, Maldacena showed that you can completely describe everything that happens in a three-dimensional region of space using only information on its two-dimensional boundary. The interior three-dimensional physics is mathematically equivalent to the boundary two-dimensional physics. This wasn't just theoretical. Thousands of physicists have worked on this correspondence, and it's been confirmed in countless mathematical examples. The holographic principle appears to be a fundamental feature of reality. But here's where it gets really wild. If the holographic principle applies to black holes, it might apply to our entire universe. Some physicists now believe that all of three-dimensional reality, including you, me, and everything we can see, is actually a holographic projection of information encoded on a distant two-dimensional surface. Dr. Leonard Susskind puts it this way. The holographic principle is the statement that everything inside a volume of space can be described by information on the boundary of that space. In a sense, the interior is an illusion. Think about what this means for your existence. Your body, which feels so solid and three-dimensional, might actually be a projection of information stored on a distant cosmic boundary. You're not, really. Here in the sense you think you are. You're a pattern of information being projected into this apparent three-dimensional space. But the strangeness doesn't stop there. The holographic principle suggests that every part of the boundary contains information about the entire interior. This means that every small piece of the cosmic boundary contains information about the entire universe, including you. This is similar to how a holographic photograph works. If you cut a holographic image in half, you don't get half an image. You get the whole image, just with less resolution. Every piece of a hologram contains the entire image. If our universe is holographic, then every part of reality contains information about every other part. You are not separate from the rest of the universe. You are connected to everything at the most fundamental level. This connects to another profound pattern in nature, fractals. A fractal is a geometric structure that looks the same at every scale. Zoom into a fractal, and you see the same patterns repeating infinitely. Dr. Benoit Mandelbrot, who coined the term fractal, discovered that these self-similar patterns are everywhere in nature. Coastlines, mountains, clouds, trees, blood vessels, neurons, they all display fractal geometry. The branching pattern of your lungs is similar to the branching pattern of rivers, which is similar to the branching pattern of lightning, which is similar to the branching pattern of your blood vessels. But fractals aren't just shapes, they're patterns of information processing. Your brain is fractal in its structure and function. Your consciousness itself might be fractal, patterns of awareness repeating at different scales. From individual thoughts to global awareness. Dr. Stuart Kaufman, a theoretical biologist, has proposed that life itself is fractal. Organisms are made of organs, which are made of tissues, which are made of cells, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms. At each level, you see similar patterns of organization and information processing. Some researchers believe that consciousness is fractal too. Your awareness contains thoughts, which contain concepts, which contain memories, which contain sensations. Each level of consciousness reflects patterns found at other levels. If reality is both holographic and fractal, then you contain the entire universe within you, and the universe contains infinite copies of you at different scales. You are not just in the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself from one particular perspective in an infinite fractal of consciousness. Dr. Nassim Haramein has developed a unified field theory based on the idea that space itself is fractal and holographic. According to Haramein, every point in space contains information about every other point, creating an infinite network of connection and information exchange. This might explain some of the spooky features of quantum mechanics. If every point in space contains information about every other point, then quantum entanglement becomes natural. Particles aren't mysteriously connected across space. They're connected through space by sharing information at every point. But here's the most mind-bending implication. If reality is fractal and holographic, then the distinction between inside and outside, between self and other, between small and large, might be illusory. You might simultaneously exist at every scale of reality. There might be entire universes inside each of your atoms, populated by conscious beings who think they're living in the real universe. And you might be an atom in the body of some unimaginably vast being who thinks you're just a tiny component of their reality. Think about this right now. As you're listening to this, you're made up of trillions of cells, each of which is like a tiny organism with its own agenda. Your cells don't know they're part of you. They're just doing their cellular business. But their collective activity creates your consciousness. Similarly, you might be a cell in some vast organism that you can't even conceive of. Your thoughts and actions might be like the biochemical processes of a cell, contributing to some unimaginably large consciousness that you're not even aware of. This fractal view of reality suggests that consciousness and intelligence exist at every scale, from the quantum level to the cosmic level. You are simultaneously the observer and the observed, the container and the contained, the dreamer and the dream. But if this is true, it raises a profound question. In a fractal, holographic universe where everything contains everything else, what is the nature of individual identity? Who or what are you, really? Here's a question that will shake you to your core. What if everything you think of as you is an illusion? What if the solid sense of being a continuous, unified self is just another trick your brain is playing on you? Neuroscience has uncovered something disturbing about the nature of selfhood. The you that you think you are, the continuous, unified person with a clear identity, doesn't actually exist. What you call yourself is more like a constantly changing coalition of processes with no central controller, no permanent essence, and no clear boundaries. Let's start with something simple that will reveal the first crack in your sense of self. Try this exercise. Pay attention to your thoughts right now. Don't try to control them. Just observe them. Notice how they arise seemingly from nowhere, persist for a moment, and then disappear, replaced by other thoughts. Here's the unsettling question. If you are your thoughts, then who is observing your thoughts? If you're in control of your thoughts, why can't you stop thinking right now? If your thoughts are yours, why do they often surprise you, disturb you, or go in directions you don't want them to go? Dr. Sam Harris, a neuroscientist and philosopher, has spent decades investigating the nature of consciousness and self. His conclusion is startling. The sense of being a subject, a thinker of thoughts, an experiencer of experiences, is an illusion. There is consciousness, but there is no one who is conscious. This might sound abstract, but neuroscience backs it up with hard evidence. When scientists look at the brain, they can't find anywhere that corresponds to a unified self. Instead, they find a collection of specialized modules, one for language, one for visual processing, one for emotional regulation, one for motor control, and so on. These modules don't report to a central command center. They operate semi-independently and sometimes even conflict with each other. What you experience as a unified self is actually the result of these modules communicating and coordinating their activities. But there's no central you orchestrating the process. Dr. Michael Gazzaniga's research on split-brain patients revealed something even more unsettling. When the connection between the brain's hemispheres is severed, patients can have two different personalities, making different decisions, and even having different beliefs. Which one is the real person? Gazzaniga's answer is that neither one is more real than the other, and neither was more real before the surgery. What we call self is always a construction created by the brain's interpreter module, which constantly creates stories to explain our experiences and maintain the illusion of a unified identity. Think of it like this. Imagine your brain is like a large corporation with many different departments. The marketing department, your brain's interpreter, constantly creates press releases, claiming that there's a CEO making all the decisions. But when you look for this CEO, you find only a collection of departments doing their own things, and occasionally sending memos to each other. The CEO, your sense of self, is just a story. The marketing department tells to create the illusion of unified leadership. But there is no CEO. There never was. This illusion of selfhood is so convincing that it's hard to see through it. But there are ways to catch glimpses of the truth. Meditation, psychedelic experiences, and certain neurological conditions can temporarily dissolve the sense of self, revealing the underlying field of consciousness from which the illusion of selfhood emerges. Dr. Robin Carhart Harris at Imperial College London has used brain imaging to study what happens during psychedelic experiences. His research shows that psychedelics quiet the brain's default mode network, the collection of brain regions that normally create and maintain the sense of self. When this network is suppressed, people report experiences of ego dissolution, the temporary disappearance of the sense of being a separate self. Instead of feeling like an individual looking out at the world, they feel like consciousness itself, without boundaries or separation from everything else. These experiences aren't just curiosities, they're glimpses of what consciousness is like, without the overlay of selfhood. And what people consistently report is that this boundaryless awareness feels more fundamental, more real than their normal sense of being a separate self. But you don't need drugs to glimpse this. Advanced meditators in traditions around the world have been discovering the same thing for thousands of years. Through careful investigation of their own experience, they've found that what they thought was a solid, continuous self is actually a constantly changing process with no fixed center. Buddhist meditation masters describe this as anatman, the doctrine of no self. Hindu traditions speak of realizing that what you think of as yourself is actually Atman, universal consciousness appearing as an individual. Sufi mystics describe fana, the dissolution of the ego into divine consciousness. These aren't just religious beliefs. They're reports of direct investigation into the nature of consciousness and identity. And modern neuroscience is confirming what contemplatives have been saying for millennia. The self is a construction, not a reality. Dr. Anil Seth puts it this way: we are all hallucinating all the time, including hallucinating ourselves. But if the self is an illusion, what does that mean for your life? Does it mean nothing matters? Does it mean you don't exist? Not at all. It means something far more profound and liberating. First, it means that the boundaries you think separate you from others are not as solid as they seem. If your individual self is a construction, then the barriers between yourself and others are also constructions. At the deepest level, you and everyone else are expressions of the same underlying consciousness. Second, it means that the stories you tell yourself about who you are, your identity, your personality, your limitations, are much more flexible than you think. If the self is constantly being constructed, then it can be reconstructed. You are not trapped by your past or limited by your current self-concept. Third, it means that your suffering, which is often based on defending and maintaining your sense of self, is optional. Much of human psychological pain comes from threats to our self-image, conflicts between our ego and reality, and the fear of losing what we think we are. If you can see through the illusion of selfhood, much of this suffering simply dissolves. Think about it. Most of your worries are about things happening to you, your reputation, your security, your future. But if there is no solid you to Be threatened. What is there to worry about? Most of your conflicts with others are about defending your position, your beliefs, your identity. But if your identity is flexible and constructed, why defend it so rigidly? This doesn't mean becoming passive or nihilistic. It means recognizing that you are not the small, separate, vulnerable self you think you are. You are something much more vast and resilient. You are consciousness itself, temporarily organized into the pattern you call your life. Dr. Douglas Harding, a philosopher and consciousness researcher, developed what he called headless way, a method for directly experiencing the absence of a separate self. His simple experiments show that when you look carefully at your direct experience, you can't actually find your head or your face or your separate body. What you find instead is an open space of awareness in which the world appears. Try this right now. Point at what you call yourself. Most people point at their chest or their head. But when you look in the direction you're pointing, what do you actually see? You see the room, the walls, perhaps your hands or body. But you don't see what you're pointing at, the supposed center of yourself. What you find when you look for yourself is not a thing but a space, the open awareness in which all experience appears. This space has no boundaries, no center, no edges. It's not separate from what appears in it. You are not a separate observer looking out at the world. You are the space of awareness in which the world appears. This recognition changes everything. Instead of being a small, isolated self struggling to survive in a hostile universe, you realize you are the universe experiencing itself from this particular perspective. Instead of being separate from others, you realize that others are you, appearing as different characters in the same cosmic drama. But this raises the ultimate question. If the self is an illusion, and if you are actually unlimited consciousness, appearing as an individual, then what is the point of individual existence? Why does consciousness bother to create the illusion of separation? Why would infinite, unlimited consciousness choose to experience itself as billions of separate, limited beings? Why would the universe create the elaborate illusion of individuality? If oneness is the deeper truth, why does the cosmic mind fragment itself into finite minds that struggle, suffer, and feel isolated? This might be the most profound question we can ask, and the answer reveals something beautiful about the nature of existence itself. Think about it from the perspective of unlimited consciousness. If you were infinite, eternal, and perfect, what would you lack? What would you desire? What could you possibly want to experience? The answer is limitation itself. Boundaries, surprise, discovery, growth, love, pain, joy. All of these experiences require the appearance of separation, the illusion of being finite, the drama of not knowing who you really are. Dr. Stanislav Grof, a pioneer in consciousness research, spent decades studying non-ordinary states of consciousness through psychedelic therapy and breathwork. His research revealed something remarkable. When people transcend their ordinary sense of self, they often report that individual existence is not a mistake or a trap. It's a precious opportunity for consciousness to know itself in ways that would be impossible without apparent separation. Think of it like this. Imagine you're a master chess player who has become so skilled that no game challenges you anymore. Every move your opponent makes, you see coming 20 moves ahead. Every game becomes predictable and boring. What would you want most? To play against an opponent who could surprise you, challenge you, make you work for your victories. But here's the problem. No such opponent exists. So what do? You fragment your consciousness, create separate versions of yourself with limited perspectives, and let them play against each other. Each fragment thinks it's playing against separate opponents, creating genuine surprise, struggle, and discovery. From this perspective, individual existence is not a fall from grace. It's consciousness giving itself the gift of uncertainty, challenge, and growth. Every struggle you face, Every obstacle you overcome, every moment of love you experience is consciousness, exploring possibilities that would be impossible from the perspective of unlimited awareness. Dr. Amit Goswami, the quantum physicist we discussed earlier, describes this as consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. Consciousness hides behind the illusion of separation, then gradually awakens to its true nature through the experiences of individual existence. But the game is not random or meaningless. There appears to be a direction to the process, an evolutionary trend toward greater complexity, consciousness, and love. Dr. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a paleontologist and philosopher, observed that evolution shows a clear pattern, from simple matter to complex life to self-aware consciousness. He proposed that this trend continues toward what he called the omega point, a future state where individual consciousness evolves into a unified global consciousness while maintaining the richness of individual perspective. Think about it. Over billions of years, the universe has evolved from unconscious matter to conscious beings who can understand the universe itself. Atoms learned to think. Stardust became self-aware. The cosmos developed the ability to know itself through countless individual perspectives. You are not an accident in this process. You are the process. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself. Your individual life, with all its struggles and discoveries, is how consciousness explores its own potential. But why is the process often so difficult? Why does awakening to our true nature often involve suffering? Dr. Richard Miller, a clinical psychologist and consciousness researcher, suggests that suffering serves a crucial function in consciousness development. Just as physical pain alerts us to threats to our bodily health, psychological suffering alerts us to threats to our authentic being. When you suffer because you're not living authentically, because you're trying to be someone you're not, because you're chasing things that don't fulfill you, that suffering is actually guidance. It's consciousness nudging you back toward your true path. Think of it like this. Imagine you're an actor who has become so identified with a role that you've forgotten you're acting. The role becomes constraining and painful because it's not who you really are. The pain you feel is not punishment. It's a reminder to remember your true identity. This is what the great spiritual traditions have always taught. Suffering is not random cruelty, but a teacher. It's consciousness creating conditions that encourage awakening. The very experiences that seem to separate us from our true nature are actually what drive us to seek our true nature. Dr. Eckhart Tolle, drawing from his own experience of awakening, describes how intense psychological suffering can create what he calls cracks in the ego, openings through which our deeper nature can be glimpsed. The pain that seems to threaten our identity can actually liberate us from false identification. But awakening doesn't mean the end of individual existence. It means the end of the suffering that comes from taking individual existence to be ultimate reality. You can continue to play your role as an individual while knowing it's a role. You can experience emotions, pursue goals, and love others while knowing that at the deepest level, you are what they are. Think of it like being an actor who fully embodies their character while never forgetting their acting. The performance becomes more authentic, not less, because it's conscious rather than unconscious. The actor can feel genuine emotions as the character while maintaining the peace of knowing their true identity. This might be the ultimate purpose of the illusion of reality, to give consciousness the experience of finding itself. Every moment of confusion creates the possibility of clarity. Every experience of separation creates the potential for reunion. Every individual journey of awakening adds something unique to the total understanding of what consciousness can be. You are not here by mistake. Your specific perspective, your unique combination of experiences, your particular path of awakening, none of this has ever existed before and will never exist again. You are consciousness exploring a completely unique Possibility. The meaning behind the illusion is not that the illusion should be destroyed, but that it should be seen through. Not that individual existence should end, but that it should be understood for what it is: infinite consciousness playing finite roles in order to know itself more completely. Your life matters not despite being an illusion, but because it's such. A beautiful, unique, contemporary expression of something eternal. You are both the wave and the ocean, both the actor and the audience, both the dreamer and the dream. But recognizing this truth raises a practical question. How do you live with this understanding? How do you navigate everyday life when you know that reality is not what it seems? So here you are, potentially convinced that reality is far stranger than you ever imagined. Colors don't exist. Time might be an illusion. You might be in a simulation. Your sense of self is a construction. The solid world is mostly empty space, and consciousness might be the only thing that's real. Now what? How do you live with this? Knowledge? How do you get up tomorrow morning, go to work, pay your bills, and maintain relationships when everything you thought was real turns out to be questionable? This is not just a philosophical problem. It's a practical one that every person who glimpses the illusory nature of reality must face. The good news is that understanding the illusion doesn't require you to abandon life. It can actually make life richer, more meaningful, and more peaceful. Dr. Alan Watts, the philosopher who spent his life translating Eastern wisdom for Western minds, faced this exact challenge. His solution was beautifully simple. The art of living is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past and the known on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new, and unique, in having the mind open and wholly receptive. The key insight is that recognizing illusion doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything matters differently. When you understand that your experience is constructed by consciousness, you can participate more consciously in that construction. Think of it like this. When you watch a movie, you know it's not real. You know the actors are playing roles. The sets are artificial, and the story is fiction. But this knowledge doesn't diminish your enjoyment. It can actually enhance it. You can appreciate the artistry, the craft, the emotional truth being conveyed through fiction. You can be moved by the story while knowing it's a story. Life is similar. Recognizing that your personal drama is a kind of cosmic theater doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it a conscious performance rather than an unconscious one. Dr. Stephen Batchelor, a contemporary Buddhist teacher, describes this as secular spirituality, living with full engagement while maintaining what he calls noble doubt about the ultimate nature of our experience. You can care deeply about your relationships, your work, and your goals while holding lightly to the stories you tell yourself about their ultimate importance. This approach resolves one of the biggest challenges people face when they begin to see through consensus reality, the fear that nothing matters. The opposite is actually true. When you realize that your experience is being constructed moment by moment, every moment becomes an opportunity for conscious creation. Consider your relationships. When you understand that the boundary between yourself and others is not as solid as it seems, you can love more freely. You're no longer protecting a separate self from potential hurt. You're participating in consciousness, exploring what it means to connect with itself through apparent separation. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationships shows that the healthiest couples are those who can maintain what he calls positive sentiment override, the ability to see their partner's essential goodness even during conflicts. This becomes natural when you recognize that conflicts are temporary patterns arising in consciousness, not threats to your essential being. Think about your work and goals. When you understand that your identity is flexible and constructed, you can pursue achievements without being attached to them. You can work hard without being driven by the fear of failure or the need to prove yourself. Your actions can come from inspiration rather than desperation. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states shows that people are happiest when they're fully engaged in activities for their own sake, not for external rewards. This natural state becomes more accessible when you're not constantly defending and enhancing a separate self. Even your relationship with suffering changes. When you understand that psychological pain often comes from resisting what's happening or trying to maintain illusions, you can meet difficult experiences with less resistance. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's work on mindfulness-based stress reduction shows that simply observing pain without identifying with it can dramatically reduce suffering. This becomes easier when you realize that thoughts and emotions are temporary patterns arising in awareness, not fundamental aspects of who you are, but perhaps the most practical benefit of understanding the illusion of reality is the freedom it gives you to experiment with your experience. If consciousness is constructing your reality, then you can participate more consciously in that construction. Try this. For the next week, experiment with the assumption that other people are consciousness, expressing itself through different personalities. Notice how this changes your interactions. Instead of seeing conflicts as battles between separate selves, see them as consciousness exploring different perspectives and working toward understanding. Experiment with the assumption that challenging situations are opportunities for consciousness to learn about itself. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this experience teaching consciousness about itself through me?" Experiment with the assumption that your thoughts and emotions are weather patterns in the sky of awareness. Instead of being caught up in every mental storm, practice being the sky that contains all weather while being disturbed by none of it. Dr. Rupert Spira, a contemporary teacher of non-dual awareness, suggests a simple practice. Regularly ask yourself, "What am I?" Not as an intellectual exercise, but as a direct investigation into your immediate experience. Notice that what you really are is the aware presence in which all experience appears. This investigation doesn't require you to withdraw from life. It can be done while washing dishes, talking to friends, or sitting in traffic. The goal is not to escape your human experience, but to recognize the awareness that makes all experience possible. But there's something even more profound about learning to live consciously in the illusion. As you begin to see through the construction of reality, you start to realize that you're not just observing the illusion, you're participating in its evolution. That every moment of consciousness, every choice you make, every way you respond to life, is contributing to consciousness's ongoing self-discovery. You're not just living in the cosmic dream, you're helping to dream it. This brings a sense of responsibility and purpose that goes far beyond personal achievement. Your awakening matters, not just for you, but for the entire evolution of consciousness. Every moment of clarity, every act of love, every recognition of truth contributes to consciousness knowing itself more completely. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research on morphic resonance suggests that when members of the species learn new behaviors, it becomes easier for other members to learn the same behaviors, even across vast distances. If this principle applies to consciousness, then your awakening makes it easier for others to awaken. Think of it like this. You're part of a vast network of consciousness that's gradually remembering its true nature. Every individual awakening strengthens the field, making it easier for the next person to see through the illusion. This doesn't mean proselytizing or trying to convince others of what you've realized. It means living your understanding so authentically that it naturally inspires others to investigate their own experience. The most powerful way to help others wake up is to wake up yourself, not as a separate achievement, but as a contribution to the collective awakening of consciousness. But as you begin to live this way, you'll face a final challenge. How do you maintain this understanding in a world where most people are still unconsciously identified with the illusion? How do you stay awake in a sleeping world? You've just taken a journey to the edge of reality itself. You've seen evidence that colors are constructions of your brain, that time might be an illusion, that you might be living in a simulation, that your sense of self is fabricated, and that consciousness might be the only thing that truly exists. But now comes the real challenge, integrating this understanding into your daily life without losing your sanity, your relationships, or your ability to function in a world where most people haven't had these realizations. This is what spiritual traditions call the return to the marketplace, the challenge of bringing transcendent understanding into ordinary life. It's one thing to glimpse the illusory nature of reality in a moment of insight. It's another thing entirely to live from that understanding consistently. Dr. Jack Kornfield, who has guided thousands of people through spiritual awakening, warns about what he calls spiritual bypassing, using spiritual insights to avoid dealing with the practical challenges of human existence. Just because you've realized that your ego is an illusion doesn't mean you can ignore your psychological patterns, your relationships, or your responsibilities. The goal is not to transcend your humanity, but to live it more consciously. You still need to pay your bills, maintain your health, and treat people with kindness. But you can do all of this from a different place, from the recognition that you are consciousness playing the role of a human being, rather than a human being trying. To become conscious